Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Core studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, let's talk about unlocking the power of some hidden gems, some old school cards, some cards that, well, let's just say came out in the Void years. You know, like One Piece, I think it was like the Void Century, right? We got the Void years in my Magic career where, well, I went to college and then kind of forgot about Magic for a couple years because I had different priorities. Regardless, I came back and I was like, whoa! These cards are awesome. So on today's episode, let's talk about some old school hidden gems that you can be including in some of your decks that you might not realize are out there. Let's jump into it. Oh, and of course, I should have mentioned this too. They're all very budget friendly. Let's jump into it. First up, now I will say these aren't like, hey, incredible staples that you've never seen before that can fit in any deck. No, these are cards that are going to be amazing in the decks that really want them, and ones that you might not know about, like Runechanter Pike, an artifact equipped for 2 mana, equip 2, equip creature has first strike, it's plus X plus 0, XA number instant, and source cards in your graveyard. You might not realize just the actual potential of, even just in a regular game of Commander, again, like one that isn't necessarily a Spellslinger deck, let's say, how many instants and sorceries end up in your graveyard throughout the game? I mean, this very easily, just saying, regular game could be like plus 5, plus 0, and first strike, making a lot of your creatures hit a lot harder. I mean, your commander can end up becoming a Voltron, you know, take out your opponent's commander pretty easily with this kind of a card in the deck. Now, obviously, you want to make sure you use this, again, in the right deck. Obviously, if you do have more inserts in your deck, like a Spellslinger type strategy, yeah, your commander can hit really, really hard with this, or other creatures as well. And keep in mind that first strike is pretty underrated sometimes. That is amazing protection in combat, and actually some kind of a combat deterrence as well for opponents to actually swing at you as well, get the creature back. So yeah, this can really increase power quite a bit. Next up, speaking of that, Bonehoard. This thing is amazing. Just 15 cents right now. Living weapon for 4. Equipment, equip 2. Equip creature gets plus X, X, creature cards in all graveyards. Again, because it's a living weapon, ETBs, you get a 0/0 black Phyrexian Germ. That used to be just a Germ, now Phyrexian Germ, because Phyrexian is a type. So essentially you're getting, I mean, 4 mana, you're getting a creature that is probably pretty large already. Again, you might not just play this on like turn 4, but later in the game when you play this, there's probably going to be a decent amount of creatures in graveyards, especially if you have a deck that works with that, getting creatures in your own graveyard or others, like a mill type strategy or one that likes to destroy the board, that kind of stuff essentially. But yeah, being able to say, oh, okay, for 4 mana, I get like a, say, 10/10. Again, you're playing Commander, you've got 3 opponents, 4 players' graveyards in total. Let's say you get a 10/10 for 4 mana, that's amazing. Also, even if that one gets dealt with, you still have this equipment sitting around. You just pay 2 mana to equip this to any of your creatures, and all of a sudden, that creature gains a massive boost. Yeah, throughout the game, that creature's going to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah, like a power matters strategy, one that cares about equipment, one that cares about power. Make sure you're considering this kind of a card. And the next artifact, though, is Culling Deus. This one's an artifact for just 2 mana. Tap, sacrifice a creature, put a charge counter on it. Pay 1, sacrifice, draw a card for a charge counter on it. I probably should have mentioned that. Thank you, Moxfield, for existing. You're an amazing website. It is pulling up the least expensive version of all these cards, so I think you're seeing this in Double Masters or whatever that one was. This card actually came out back in, what was it, 2008, 2012, around that area, so these are older cards, even if they seem like they're newer with the reprints. Regardless, this is a fantastic sacrifice outlet for you. It is repeatable, and it is a free repeat, but it's also one that's not repeatable in the same turn. Does that all make sense? Like, if a Seer is repeatable in that you can keep sacrificing a creature for free as long as you have a creature sacrifice whenever you want to, again, because there's no tap effect. This, you have to tap it, so it's probably about 1 free trip on the table, unless you have other untap effects for it. That being said, it is free once you get out there to just do it again, and then next time, again, and the next time, again. So essentially, again, a like aristocrat style strategy can really utilize this one, or if you have like a threaten type strategy as well, you're like stealing your opponent's creatures, sacrificing them, building up charge counters on this, and then turning your creatures into eventual card draw. That is huge. Your creatures or your opponent's creatures if you're stealing them. That being said, these days, of course, we also have a lot of ways to interact with and increase the number of counters that we're getting on this proliferate type effects, for example. So this can be a huge kind of card where you're just storing up a bunch of eventual card draw, and then you're just paying 1 mana when you need to actually just pop this and draw a ton of cards. So yeah, a sacrifice outlet / a lot of card draw for you. This can be absolutely huge for the right deck. Moving on, Isolation Cell. This one is quite funny. Artifact for a forward. Opponent casts a creature spell. They lose 2 life unless they pay 2. This can be really good in, say, obviously like a Staxy type strategy, so that might be not for certain groups, I should say, but also just for like a group slug type strategy where you're just trying to dish out a lot of damage. Again, there is that option. This is not just straight up stacks where it's like, okay, pay the 2 because you have to pay the 2. No, this is, if you don't pay the 2, there's a little damage to it. It's kind of like Rook Thar essentially with 6 damage on non-creature spells, but the exact opposite. This one punishes creature-based strategies. If you have more of like a spell-slinging type approach, more of like just like artifacts or enchantments or whatever it is, you can also consider this one being like, oh, okay, I know my opponent's gonna have a lot of creatures, I won't, and it's fine. So, hey, this doesn't really affect you anyways. Even if you do have a creature-based strategy, it might be an odd include in that kind of a deck, but again, this only affects your opponent, so keep that in mind. Next up, Hedron Matrix, an artifact equipment for 4, equip 4. Creatures plus X, or X is converted mana cost. This is an equipment that I think it's slept on quite a bit. And essentially all you need to ask yourself is okay, like, is my commander ever going to be a win condition for me when it comes to combat? If that's the case, it's not always Voltron, all right, when it comes to that. Like, just, you could have, like, a powerful commander that, like, can hit pretty hard and has some evasion, but, like, the main win condition of that deck is not your commander going into combat and winning for you. You can think of, like, some dragons, essentially, like that. But, yes, being able to say, oh, okay, like, I throw this on a commander that maybe is, like, 6/6 flyer that costs 6, cool. Now, all of a sudden, it's hitting for 12. It's now a 2-shot KO instead of a 4-shot KO. So keep that in mind, again, thanks to commander damage. Obviously, this helps with, like, you know, if you have a bunch of creatures in the deck that have a good amount of converted mana cost as well, pumping up some of your other creatures too, make sure you're considering that one. Next up, a Trixie card. Trixie Hobbitses. That's not a Hobbit card. Anyways, Soul Conduit artifact for 6, pay 6, tap 2 target players exchange life totals. This thing, when you put this down, your opponents go, oh no, because this can change the entire dynamic of the game entirely. And obviously this can also be something that a couple of your opponents can be like, oh, thank you, oh my goodness, yeah, that other player over there is a massive problem right now. They're at like 80 life, they've gained all this life, we're all low, they're the big threat, let's take them out. So being able to exchange 2 players' life totals, again, doesn't have to be your own. It can be, obviously, if you're, like, low or you want to get, like, the most life out of anyone. Cool. Take the biggest life total, swap with your own. But also it could be, okay, that player over there is at 2. That player is at 80. That player at 2 is not a threat at all, and I can take them out even if they have a lot of life later. That player over there is at 80, and I can't take them out right now, but if I do put them at 2, I can easily take them out. This is a game-ending card against certain opponents. This is literally just, okay, you 2 swap, I attack you, you're gone. And again, I can deal with that player over there by giving them a bunch of life. That's fine. Or I can swap it again next turn so I get their life total, essentially. But yeah, this is a very, very good card that can really change a game. Of course, it works very well also with, well, life gain synergies as well. Keep in mind that when you do life swap, if you are going up in life, that is considered a life gain. If I go from 20 to 40 with a life swap, I gain 20 life. So any kind of life gain triggering type effects work with this as well. It's a very interesting card, one that works well, of course, in life loss synergies as well. Like oh no, I'm going down with, like, you know, my Villas deck. I'm going down to 2. Okay, cool. I'll swap with you. All of a sudden, you're at 2. I'm at a lot. It's a very interesting card. Next up, Strata Scythe, an artifact equipment for 3, equip 3, imprint, enters the battlefield, search life for a land card, exile it, then show up your library. Equip creatures +1 for each land on the battlefield with the same name as the exile card. This one's interesting because, well, Black Blader Forge sees an absurd amount of play, which it's a very good card. I mean, absurd, is for an equipment. It's, you know, it's very, a lot of play. Anyways, it sees a lot of play. That pumps for each land you control. Also a decently high equip cost depending on if it's a ledger creature or non-ledger creature. That being said, this one, very, very good for mono-color decks specifically, or decks, I guess, that have a lot of the same land. It has a lower, threshold for, you know, not just counting every land because it's specific. But again, if you're playing in like a mono green deck that utilizes a commander that wants to hit hard, or creatures that want to hit hard, this can help you hit really, really hard. Next up, Mage Slayer, the last artifact I'm going to be bringing up. Artifact equipment for 3 in Gruul. Whenever a creature attacks, it deals damage equal to its power to the player planeswalker it's attacking, equip 3. This is one that I think it's slept on for decks that, well, have a heavy hitting creature, or hard hitting creature, I should say. Yeah, this is basically like free hit on an opponent, like as if your creature is unblockable, essentially. Just like, oh, okay, cool, I've got a 10-10, I'm swinging at you. That's 10 damage right there, just for equipping this on the creature, of course, on top of any other effects you're going to be having too. Yeah, this is a very, very interesting card that helps you be very, very aggressive. Keep in mind ones that are also like whenever it deals damage to a player, that kind of stuff too. So make sure you consider it not combat damage to a player, but damage to a player. So Mage Slayer is a very interesting one for an aggressive type strategy that likes to have big creatures. You can hit really hard with something spicy like this. Moving on though, let's move on to some creatures that you definitely might want to consider. Riddlesmith. This is in my forbidden deck that I do not play anymore, except in very specific scenarios where I'm like, hey, everyone, if we're playing our highest power, are you okay with my Joy deck? Because it's Artifact Storm. Riddlesmith, a 2-1 Human Artificer for 2 mana in blue. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. That is basically a free loot every single time you're casting artifacts. If you have an artifact-based deck, definitely consider this one, because that is an amazing amount of card selection. Not card advantage, card selection. But still, that amount of synergy can be absolutely incredible. Obviously, it plays with the graveyard as well. If you need discard synergy, that's nice as well. But still, being able to say, okay, I play an artifact. Let's draw a card. Oh, okay, I don't really need this land in my hand anymore. Let's ditch that, essentially, and replace useless cards in your hand with better cards. Dig through your deck. This is a crazy good card, a very crucial piece. One of those kind of key cogs into like a Joyride deck. Next up, Brutalizer Exarch, just at 15 cents. I love this card. 3-3 for 6 mana in green. Yeah, you never see it these days, right? 6 mana for a 3-3. What? That being said, it's got a lot of utility to it. Enters the battlefield, choose one, search life for a creature card, reveal, put in your hand. Sorry, shuffle your library, put it on top of it. There we go. Not in your hand. Or put target non-creature permanent on the bottom of someone's library. I think that like putting something on the bottom of someone's library gets underrated. I'd say that's probably better than destroying it. Like, that is, because there are a lot more decks out there that are kind of, like, interacting with, like, their graveyard, getting things back out of their graveyard. It's easier for someone, most likely, most of the time, I will say, to get something out of their graveyard and back in their hand than, like, get it off the bottom of their library. Yeah, you can say, like, oh, well, what if they, Evolving Wild, shuffle their deck, and then they get back to it. Okay, like, they have, like, a 1 out of 80 shot, essentially, of getting back to it, right? Essentially, because it's going to take a while for them. Basically, the way that I consider is, like, okay, Exile is gone basically permanently. Bottom of library is better than, like, destroying. So, yeah, you being able to, like, get rid of something permanently on an ETB, that's huge. So, being able to get rid of something, or, again, if you have a deck that's built around a certain creature, and this is probably really where, like, the actual card comes in play. If you have a deck built around a certain creature, or creatures, I should say, yeah, utilize this, especially if you have some ways to use and abuse this ETB again and again and again. Tutor for those creatures that you need. Get them on your deck. Or, yeah, if you need that removal, it's fantastic removal, too. Next up, speaking of creatures, Garrick's Horde. Not Derek. I don't know why I said Derek. Be funny. Here's the Planeswalkers. We've got Jace, Liliana, and Derek. All right, Derek's out there. Comment below. All right, 7/7 Beast with Trample for 7 mana. Play the top card of your library revealed. You may cast the top of your library if it's a creature card. Now, obviously, they did switch this a while back, like when Future Sight, not the card Future Sight, essentially. It allows you to, play out the top of your library. You have to have it revealed. They switched it more recently to being like, you may look at it at any time. So, like, what's the top of your library. Your opponents don't. That being said, with this, yeah, you're letting your opponents know what's on top of your library. Oh, no. It's worth it. It's definitely worth it. For a 7/7 Trampler for 7, that lets you play off the top of your library. I think some players, again, kind of like what I just said with Brutalizer Exarch and, like, putting things on the bottom is a little underrated. Playing off the top of your library is a little underrated because that's, like, can be a lot better than card draw. In fact, like, it can be just so much better than card draw. Like, sometimes, would you rather have this in play or something that draws you 3? I mean, over time, I definitely would have this in play because this can give me the potential to get more and more and more and more and more cards off the top of my library, essentially. It's kind of like a second hand, but if you keep hitting creatures off the top, it's like, oh, okay, I drew another card. Okay, I drew another card. Okay, I drew another card. It's a lot of value for you, especially if you have some top deck manipulation. But yeah, if you have a creature-based strategy with a ton of creatures in it, just throw this in there, and that is so much value for you, on top of it being a heavy hitter as well, again, 7/7. Moving on, Dauntless Escort. Speaking of creature-based strategies, and this thing can come in huge. A 3/3 Rhino Soldier for 3 mana in Selesnya. Sacrifice a creature control, gain indestructible until end of turn. Oh, what's that one? There's a spirit that's a 2/1 flyer. Selfless Spirit. Is that it? I think. Anyways, that sacrifices at 2. Yeah, would you rather have, one that's a 2/1 flyer at 2 mana versus a 3/3 at 3 mana that does the exact same thing? Sure. but is it still a very good effect? Absolutely. Having a board wipe protection effect essentially sticking out on the battlefield, ready to go, that you don't have to pay to activate. Yeah, that is massive. Being able to just keep this in play and say, okay, I've got my army, I'm swinging, I'm doing great things. If anyone tries to destroy the board, I've got a response that I am ready to go. Even if I'm tapped out, I've got a response. Dauntless Escort is a really cool card. And obviously, if you have any ways to like get it back or get it back on the play of your graveyard, helps even more than that. Next up, Copperhorn Scout, a 1/1 elf scout for a single green mana. When it attacks, untap each other creature you control. It's a very simple, very easy interaction, and one that has a good amount of implications. First of all, yeah, it's kind of like a pseudo-vigilance in a way, obviously, because it's like, okay, I swing. I mean, again, this one doesn't have vigilance, but it basically gives all your other creatures vigilance because they're swinging, they're like, aha, and now I'm untapped, so I can block. So there's obviously that. More likely, though, what you're going to be utilizing this for is, well, I mean, just like in an elf deck, this can really help because a lot of your elves might have tapping, you know, for mana. That being said, though, yeah, any kind of a deck that has a lot of creatures, including just the commander out there that's like, I like to untap and tap for an ability, you can get a lot of value of something like this. Again, untapping your entire team for 1 mana, Vitalize, a card like that is amazing. This one's on a creature, though, so obviously you get kind of those synergies as well. And, of course, if this survives combat, you can make, like, again, like, let's say you're in a scenario where, like, you and 2 of your opponents are in trouble because, like, third player over there is really, really scary. You can be like, okay, look, hey, I kind of need my Copperhorn Scout to stick around for all this value that I'm getting out of this to try to catch up to this player and take them down for all of us. Can I swing my Copperhorn Scout at you and you not block? It's just 1 damage. I'm sorry. It's going to be 1 damage, but let it survive so that I can have it next turn so I can do this play to help take them down. There's deals you can make. You can also, of course, like make it unblockable, like a Rogue's Patches, that kind of stuff as well. Make it bigger with like pump effects as well. But yes, a repeatable, potentially repeatable untap effect can be absolutely huge. Next up, speaking of an attack trigger, though, Kessig Cagebreaker is a 3/4 human rogue for 5 mana. When it attacks, create 2/2 Green Wolf, creature showing that's tapped and attacking for each creature out of your graveyard. Yeah, I mean, not for every kind of a deck out there, but again, if you have a heavy creature-based strategy, you're bound to get creatures in your graveyard, or get a self-mill strategy, or a graveyard-based strategy. Yeah, this can be absolutely massive, making you a massive army. Again, tapped and attacking right away, absolutely huge. Of course, like, and you know, an attack trigger strategy can work as well. It's like Wolfguard. Moving on, Victory's Herald. Yeah, apparently all the attack triggers, I'm loving them. 4/4 Angel of Flying for 6 mana. Now, keep in mind with this one, the pips might be a deterrent for certain decks out there, obviously. 3 pips, you know, in white, but still, it's at 6, so you're not planning on getting this out early, obviously. When it attacks, attacking creatures gain flying and lifelink until end of turn. That is pretty huge, giving both not only a way to get your creatures through in combat, again with that evasion, not perfect evasion obviously, but flying is usually good enough to get through on at least one opponent, or at least make it really hard for your opponents to actually block your creatures. On top of that, lifelink, so yeah, you can just like freely swing out and be like, okay, I'm going to gain a ton of life, get through my opponents, pad my life total a lot, so even if I swung out and I don't have like any blockers left, I can probably like survive because I just have such a padded life total. This is a pretty huge effect. Of course, Angel Tribal can utilize as well, although they probably already have flying. Probably don't have lifelink though. That being said, an interesting card. Next up, speaking of interesting, Mitotic Slime. This is like, and I'm just going to say this, I should have done the math beforehand, but I think it's like 7 creatures in 1 essentially for 5 mana. A 4/4 ooze for 5 mana. When it dies, create 2 2/2s that are oozes. They also have, when this creature dies, create 2 1/1s. So it goes from 1 down to 2, down to 4, essentially. So yeah, I believe that's 7 creatures in total. If you have an aristocrat-based strategy, definitely consider this one. This is, again, 7 creatures in 1. That's huge. So yeah, any of those like sacrifice effects, and it's like, okay, a sacrifice creature, I get this. Whenever a creature dies, I get this. Now keep in mind, like for like the ones say like non-token creatures, yeah, that doesn't consider those. That being said, if you've got a token-based strategy, if you've got an aristocrat-based strategy, if you've got an ooze strategy, of course, consider this one. It's really cool. Next up, Stonehorn Dignitary. This one is annoyingly fun for you. A 1/4 Rhino Soldier for 4 mana in white enters the battlefield. Target opponent skips their next combat phase. Rude is what this one is. This is, again, if you have like a blink type strategy especially, or like a clone type strategy, this can be obnoxious. Saying like, oh, okay, that player over there is in a great position. Look, their Jetmir deck. They've got so many creatures in play. Oh no, we're all in trouble. You can't attack. Okay, cool. All right, next turn comes up. I blink it. You can't attack. Okay, you too. If I keep blinking this, will you just like leave me alone because like I'm stopping that player from winning the game? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, politicking is fun in Commander. Anyways, yeah, being able to utilize this to just like shut down an opponent's combat can be just game breaking against that player and just so aggravating for them. it's quite a fun play for you. Next up, Scute Mob. I think Scute Mob kind of got forgotten after the new Scute came around. We're going to say 1/1 insect for a single green mana at the beginning of your upkeep. If you control 5 more lands, put 4 counters on this. This actually was in my very first deck, my Rishkar deck. This is one that I think is a little underrated. It's just one that, like, it's just a 1/1 for 1, sure. But it's incredibly easy in a game of Commander. Like, in other formats, no, you're not going to be like, I'm going to count on getting to 5 lands. In Commander, it's like, yeah, you're going to get to 5 lands unless you're playing CDH. You're going to get to 5 lands, which you still might get to 5 lands, but you wouldn't play that. Anyways, you're going to get to 5 lands, especially if you're in a green deck, which you are, because you're going to be ramping with green. And when you do, every single turn, this becomes into a monster. Again, 4 counters on it goes from a 1/1 to a 5/5 to a 9/9. Friggin' 1 mana. 1 mana. Sarah Ascendant. I was going to say Sarah Tower. Sarah Ascendant. Eat your heart out. Yeah, this is just something that, again, costs 1 mana. Can become a massive threat in absolutely no time. Obviously works really well with counter-based synergies, too. Yeah, it's a really cool card. Moving on, speaking of cool encounters, Deathbringer Thokdar. 3/3 zombie beast for 6 mana. Whenever the creature has been engraved from play, you may put a counter on Deathbringer Thokdar. And I shorthand +1 counter, sorry, but counter. Remove a counter from it, deals 1 damage to target creature or player. This is a huge effect. This is kind of like a Blood Artist-ish, but like flexible in its way. Now, you're not gaining life. Obviously, Blood Artist is low to the ground too, so keep all that in mind. That being said, this, of course, counts, well, anything including non-tokens. Keep that in mind. Tokens are non-token creatures. But essentially, you can save up all those counters and then utilize them when you need to. It obviously works really well with Proliferate as well. It works really well with any other counter-based synergies. But essentially, you save up those deaths as this like pain that you're going to send out at your opponents. And, of course, because it is damage versus life loss, or draining, I should say, you can utilize it in effect with, damage doubling effects as well. So make sure you're keeping that in mind. It's just very flexible. It's a very good card to have in play. And again, it's one that, like, you have like 20 counters on at a certain point. Your opponent's like, I'm going to attack you with my army. And you're like, are you sure you want to do that? Because, like, if you decide to attack me, I'm going to take out that creature. And I'd rather you just go swing at someone else and then not attack me with those creatures, because I don't want to take them out. So you're like, oh, okay, fine. Okay. And also, again, like, if your opponent has like a bunch of 1/1s, oh, they're just all gone. You just take 1 counter off, you ping that 1/1. Oh, that died. Counter on this. Ping it, ping it, ping it, ping it. Yeah, this can be really, really good. Of course, also, if you put like Death Touch on this, yeah, that is just essentially just take out any number of creatures every single time you want. Really, really good. Moving on. Bellowing Tangleworm. Just over $1. I guess I should say for this episode, I probably should have mentioned earlier, my like initial when I was going through like the, most played cards in the set, I kept going next page, next page, next page, next page. And not from the set, but from those years. And then I went down to essentially once we hit like 1% played in decks. And then obviously I was trying to keep ones that were budget friendly. So like around $1, a little bit over $1 for a couple of them. But yeah, $1.03. Very good card. 4/4 Bellowing Tangleworm for 5 mana in green. Intimidate. So it can't be blocked by artifact creatures and or creatures share color with it. Other green creatures you control to intimidate. If you've got a creature-based strategy with a ton of green creatures in it, like mono green or probably 2-color, this is huge. This is your creatures are unblockable in many scenarios. If your opponents don't have a green creature or an artifact creature, you're just coming through on them. And being able to have a 4/4 that is already basically unblockable against players, for the most part, depending on the player. Yes, not always unblockable, but at least more difficult to block. Yeah, having this just like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. All my creatures, my army now can probably get through on you. That's great. Finally, though, in creatures, Dragon Broodmother, and I did say, like, I did a little bit budget. I went a little bit out, okay? $3.63. I still want to point this one out. It used to be a lot more expensive than this. 4/4 Dragon with Flying. Oh gosh, that mana cost 6 mana. There we go, if I can count. In Gruul, beginning of each upkeep, put a 1/1 red and green dragon creature token with flying and Devour 2 into play. Devour 2 means it comes to play, you sacrifice any number of creatures. If it comes to play twice that many counters on it, sorry. Anyways, every single upkeep, you get at least a 1/1 flyer, potentially even bigger depending if you're sacrificing things. Yeah, that's massive. This is huge. Being able to just get a ton of creatures that each trip on the board again, this is a card that's just like better in Commander because you've got more opponents. You've got, more upkeeps. You've got ways to get more creatures in play now. So with each trip on the table, you're getting 4. That's 4 flying power across 4 bodies. Or again, if you're sacrificing other things, like a Riskrat style strategy, you could utilize this too because you're utilizing a free sacrifice effect essentially each turn and making this more massive. Yeah, that can be absolutely huge. And it's a 4/4 flyer too, so that's quite nice as well. Next up, enchantments. And we're going to start off with an absolutely brutal one, Martyr's Bond. This thing is crazy good. Enchantment for 6 mana in mono white. When it enters, whenever it or another non-land permanent you control is from the graveyard from the battlefield not entering, each one sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. This is massive. This is huge. This is, hey, your opponents better not deal with your things, or they're going to be dealing with their own things. Also, if you've got ways to sacrifice things, like certain decks out there, like sacrifice creatures, obviously, Aristocrat style. Certain decks out there sacrifice, well, enchantments. Certain ones that sacrifice artifacts. Again, it does say non-land. It does not say non-token. So keep that in mind. So again, if you're sacrificing a treasure, all of a sudden your opponents are like, oh, I don't have any just like useless artifacts in play. I guess I'll sacrifice a mana rock. Oh, gosh. Yeah, being able to just get things in play, sacrifice them, or again, just naturally throughout the game your things are taken out. Your opponents are going to sacrifice, again, for each one of your things taken out, 3 things are taken out, as long as your opponents each have something that shares a type with it. This is absolutely huge. Yes, it costs 6 mana, but the potential to just decimate your opponents, and even, not going to say, like, lock them out, but, like, yeah, kind of lock them out of a certain permanent type. Again, if you just have, let's say, a Viscera in play and a bunch of creatures in play, the creature, like creature fodder, creature tokens, whatever they are, your opponent's going to be hard-pressed to ever play another creature, because if they do, it's just going to get taken out the second that they comes down, if it's a threat. So being able to just say, like, oh yeah, okay, I've got this 6 mana thing that can basically wipe certain permanent types out again and again and again, if I'm set up properly, it's pretty huge. Next up, Gutter Grime, another great enchantment. Enchantment for 5 mana. Whenever a non-token creature controlled dies, put a slime counter on this, then put a green ooze creature token on the battlefield with this creature's power dice, each will the number of slime counters on it. This one, I think, is underrated for certain types of strategies. I mean, like a creature-based strategy, absolutely. But yeah, Aristocrat-style strategy, yeah, this is huge, okay? This is a card that says, whenever one of your non-token creatures dies, you get a creature that gets bigger throughout time whenever other creatures die, and your other creatures that you're making with this also get bigger too. This is just like, I mean, there's that one that's in black that's like you make a 2/2 zombie. Much better than that over time. Obviously, that first one's like, oh, I make a 1/1. Okay, fine. It's not that good then. Once you get that second one, it's already the same. I mean, except for like zombie tribals, sure. But also, like, once you get that third one, oh, okay, even better. 3/3s now, 4/4s, 5/5s. You are getting so much power when you are getting your creatures, non-token creatures in the graveyard. You just get to, well, really take advantage of that. You can also take advantage of course, proliferate effects too, getting more counters on this, really speeding things up. It's a really, really good card. Next up, this one I will say, be careful with. Typically, when it comes to card advantage, yeah, you usually want like more of a burst of cards versus like, you know, waiting over time. That being said, if you can protect this and you get ways to utilize those counters on it, you can get absurd amounts of cards with this, and this can be like priority number 1 for your opponents to take out, and if they can't, you're going to just steamroll the game. Mind Unbound enchantment for 6 mana in blue. Beginning of your upkeep, put a lore counter on it, then draw a card for each lore counter on it. Again, basically this is like next turn draw 1, next turn draw 2, next turn draw 3. This can build up so much where you're getting so much advantage out of it that if it sticks around for like 3 turns, yeah, you definitely got way more than the value that you needed out of it. And if it sticks around longer than that, you're just going to keep building on that again and again and again. Of course, like I mentioned, being able to, well, now there's ways to really like use and abuse upkeep triggers like, well, Obeka. But obviously also, you know, ways to get more counters on like proliferating again, like I mentioned. Yeah, you can get an absurd amount of card advantage out of this. Now, that being said, don't just like count on this one versus like, you know, your normal draw spells as well. But yeah, it's a really good card for like a big mana type strategy. Yeah, definitely a good card. Moving on, Viridian Revel. This one got so much better because of treasures. Enchantment for 3 mana. Whenever an artifact is put in an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, you may draw a card. Yes, technically, artifact tokens do hit the graveyard. They, like, poof, disappear right away, but, like, they hit the graveyard. So, yeah, if your opponents are sacrificing treasures, you get to draw a lot of cards. Basically, every single time they sacrifice a treasure, sure, you get a mana. Good for you. I get to draw a card. What would you rather have? So, yeah, it's huge. Of course, this cat takes in mind, like, not just, you know, token artifacts. Those are going to be the ones that are more likely to hit the graveyard, but obviously, like, they have a bunch of mana rocks, and you're like, okay, I destroy all the artifacts. Cool. I just drew a ton of cards off of that as well. So yeah, anytime artifacts hit the graveyard, this can really help you out. Finally, and I did extend the budget a little bit this one too, $3.88. This might be the most expensive of the cards I'm mentioning, but I just love this card. Heartless Summoning, an enchantment for 1 and a black. Creature spells you cast cost those cast. Creatures you control get -1/-1. This is one of those cards that, like, when you're like a newer Magic player, you might be like, well, I don't want to get my creatures -1/-1. That just, no, I don't want to make your creatures less powerful. It's like, that's worth it for the 2 mana reduction for every single one of your creatures at 2 mana total for this amazing enchantment. So yeah, slightly downside, obviously, for that -1/-1. Don't utilize this like in a token-based strategy. Obviously, we're like, oh, my 1/1s are dead. No. But yeah, utilizing this for a big creature strategy, my goodness, the amount of value this can give you is absolutely absurd. Next up, we've got Fresh Meat in the instance. An instant for 4 mana. Create a 3/3 green beast creature token for each creature putting your graveyard from the battlefield this turn. Yeah, that is a really good effect. Keep in mind that this does not specify non-token. And again, tokens technically hit the graveyard. So essentially, hey, if you've got a Aristocrat style strategy and you're like, I sacrifice all these creatures. Cool. I pay 4 mana and I replace them all with 3/3s, which is probably going to be bigger than the creatures actually had sacrificed. So absolutely amazing Aristocrat style strategy. Also just like a good like board wipe protection type card as well. A little expensive for that, but still for the right strategy, for a creature-based strategy, for a token-based strategy, for an Aristocrat strategy, definitely consider something like this. Next up, Flurry of Wings, another amazing way to make a ton of tokens. Instant for 3 mana in Bant. Put X 1/1 white bird soldier creature tokens with flying into play, where X the number of attacking creatures. This is one that, again, like, is interesting in one-on-one, but is even more interesting and has even more flexibility, I would say, in a multiplayer format like Commander. Because essentially, again, like, sure, you can utilize this. Again, like, initially, it's probably like, okay, that opponent's attacking me. I'll make a ton of birds, and I'll block. So this can kind of like be a fog for you, essentially. So that can be a good way to utilize it, but also it can be like, oh, okay, in a one-on-one form, it'd be like, all right, I'm attacking with a bunch of creatures. I've got a lot of creatures attacking. I'll make a bunch of birds. Cool. So I can have like blockers back and ready, and also just a massive army. So you kind of like double up your army in that way. So next turn I have a bunch of evasive creatures. But also in Commander, again, you've got other opponents. And it doesn't say like attacking you or attacking someone else. So because like one opponent can attack another with a giant army, you're like, well, sorry, bud. You're getting taken out over there, but that player's attacking with 20 creatures, and for 3 mana, I'm making 21/1 birds. And it's going to be my turn before that player who swung gets back up, and I can take them out with my birds now. So this can be like a game-ending, game-changing card. Again, it's flexible, and that can be like an army doubler for you. If it's like, you know, when you're attacking, it can be a fog if someone's attacking you. Or, again, it can be kind of like, and also removal as well. You could also, like, team block with certain ones of them to take certain creatures out. Or also, again, just like a game-ending card because it's like, oh, that player swung at that one. They're not taking me out. They're taking that player out, and they've got a massive army. Now I have massive army, too. It's a very interesting card. I absolutely love Flurry of Wings, especially, like, in my Feldergrip deck. Love it. Moving on to lands, or should I say land? Mystifying Maze, one that I really want to highlight. A land that can tap for 8 colors, also pay 4 in tap, exile target attacking creature and opponent controls. Beginning the next end step, return to the battlefield, tapped on its own control. This is one where, yeah, it's a really cool card. It's kind of like Maze of Ith, essentially. You have to pay for it. That being said, Maze of Ith doesn't actually tap for mana, unless you've got, like, Urborg in play, but, yeah, anyways. So this one actually does not, like, it doesn't take away from your mana count, which is lovely. But also, it's one, yes, that, like, with the lot of utility lands, like, do you want to put this in a 5-color deck? Probably not. 4-color deck? Probably not. 3, start considering them. 2, definitely consider. 1, yeah. And colorless? Absolutely. This is one that, again, is a great attack deterrent for you, because even if you don't want to spend, let's say you have, like, an instant in your hand. Let's say you have, like, you know, Fact or Fiction in your hand, and you want to be able to play that, but you have the 5 mana available. I should say it's 4, but, you know, it's 5 basically because you have to tap this. So this plus 4 other mana. If you've got that mana available and someone's trying to determine if they're going to swing at you or at the opponent, you can be like, okay, like, if you try to swing at me with that, I'm just going to blank the attack, so you might as well swing elsewhere. It can convince, just by this being in play and untapped, it can convince players to make suboptimal decisions, even if you actually aren't going to activate this. If you're like, okay, like, that player's swinging me like a 5/5, and I could just take it because I want to play my Fact or Fiction. They don't know that. They don't know you have a Fact or Fiction. So essentially, yeah, just utilize this to, again, deter attacks and also change up how players are playing against you. It's a very, and also save yourself in crucial situations, obviously. Someone's got a Blightsteel Colossus, you're not going to be like, I'd still rather play Fact or Fiction. No. Stop that Blightsteel Colossus from taking you out. But finally, let's talk about the sorceries I want to highlight, starting with Creeping Renaissance. This one is huge. Absolutely love this card. Sorcery for 5, man. You can flash it back, though, for 7. Choose a permanent type. Return all cards of the chosen type from your graveyard to your hand. This can be absolutely massive. I mean, the amount of card, I mean, it's like card advantage technically, but it's like card recursion can be huge. Being able to say, okay, again, any permanent type, most likely probably creatures and most strategies, maybe lands depending on what kind of a deck you're using, but yeah, be able to say, okay, let's get all those back, or artifacts, I guess, too, like you're playing like a, with green for whatever reason, eggs deck, absolutely. But being able to get a ton of things out of your graveyard back to your hand. Again, flexible too, depending on the situation. Like if you have a deck that's got a good amount of creatures and artifacts, say, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I've got like these 3 into my, oh yeah, these. If you're getting at least like 3 things back, maybe even just 2 things back, that's worth it. At 5, at 7, probably not. But yeah, being able to get back 10 plus things is absolutely massive with something like this. In a self-mill strategy, you might even just mill this into your graveyard and other things as well, and then you can cast that flashback, so it's kind of like card advantage with that as well. So it's pretty good in that. Speaking of bringing things back, though, Praetor's Council, bring it all back. Sorcery for 8 mana, $1.21. Return all cards from your graveyard to your hand. Exile Praetor's Council. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. There are very few effects out there that just give you blanket no maximum hand size for the rest of the game without being able to be taken out, like Thought Vessel. Yeah, it's great, but it can also be taken out. I'm not saying this is better than Thought Vessel. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that, like, this is something that your opponents can't interact with. After you have no maximum hand size, you have no maximum hand size. Your opponent can't stop you from having no maximum hand size. So therefore, you're just like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. Just keep all these cards out of my graveyard in my hand. If I have any other draw effects, I can just make a massive hand. Yeah, being able to recur your entire graveyard and then say, I can just keep everything, that is huge. That is massive. It's a really, really cool card. Yeah, is it expensive? Sure, at 8 mana, but you are in green. Yeah, it's fun. Next up, speaking of expensive but fun, Repay in Kind. I love this card. Search for 7 mana. Each player's life total becomes the lowest life total among all players. Definitely not for every kind of a strategy out there. I will say that right now. That being said, like Group Slug, you can definitely utilize something like this to be like, oh, I'm at 2. Okay, I put everyone down to 2. And I've got enough pinging effects or whatever to take everyone else out at that point. Or, of course, for a life-setting strategy like my Selenia Dark Angel deck back in the day, being able to, like, go down to 1 because you're going to set your life total to whatever you want to with, like, a commander like Selenia, as long as it's, like, variables of 2. But, yeah, anyways, down to 1 or 2, depending on your life total to start. And then be like, okay, everyone's down at that. And then, yeah, taking players out or, like, putting your life total back to 40 with something else. Regardless, it's a really cool just, like, gotcha card where it's like everyone might think they're in a good position. Again, you got that one player that's got 100 life total. You got a player there that's at 40. And everyone like, and then you're like, you're at 2. And you're like, your opponents are like, no, they're not a threat at all. They're going to get taken out shortly. And you're like, okay, everyone's down with me now. Let's go. It's a very interesting card. Next up, and finally, Wargate. $1.80. I really wish this one would get underneath $1 someday. I've not seen $1 ever, but here's hoping. Sorcery for X and Bant colors. Search life for a permanent card with converting mana cost X less when to play, then shuffle your library. I mean, this is just a really, really good card. This is a crazy good tutor. This is one that gets something into play immediately. You are in green, obviously, so you got plenty of ways to ramp. But also keep in mind, even at just like, if X is 0, it doesn't say non-land. This is 3 mana, tutor out whatever land from your deck you want into play untapped. So it's already just a great ramp effect for you if you're like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I want to go get my, again, if you have no budget, you know, restrictions, Gaia's Cradle or whatever it is. If you have a land that's really key to your deck or just really huge, impactful, go get it with this. But obviously, if you put more mana, you're like, okay, cool, yeah, I'll go get my Blightsteel Colossus or whatever it is. Yeah, you're in green. You've got ways to ramp, you've got ways to get a ton of mana. It's a really cool card. But now, as this episode is coming to a close, I should have mentioned this earlier, I'm just realizing, if you are interested in these cards, make sure you check out that card list link in the description below. I hope that you enjoyed these cards. Comment below with your thoughts on them. What other hidden gems are out there from these years? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.